So thank you for joining us today for this important look at the year in review in neuromuscular disease research. It's been a big year in research with new treatments being approved as well as unforeseen challenges. We'll be discussing all of these today. We're also excited to be talking with you on Giving Tuesday, where we will focus on all the good that can happen when people and organizations come together to transform their communities and the world. I'm Dr. Sharon Hesterly, MDA's Executive Vice President and Chief Research Officer. I'm honored to be joined today by Dr. Barry Byrne and Dr. Elizabeth McNally. Dr. Byrne is MDA's Chief Medical Advisor and Associate Chair of Pediatrics and Director of the Powell Gene Therapy Center at the University of Florida. Dr. McNally is an MDA board member, a member of MDA's Research Advisory Committee, and directs the Center for Genetic Medicine at Northwestern University. Dr. Byrne and Dr. McNally, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, great to be here. Good to see you.
Well, while we're thrilled to have these doctors with us today as medical experts, please understand they are not providing medical advice during today's program. Any decisions about your care should be made in conjunction with your doctor. We look forward to spending the next 30 minutes with you, sharing our thoughts on this important topic. Before we dive in, I'd like to thank our Facebook Live supporters, Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America, Sanofi Genzyme, and Genentech for their generous support of today's program. So we'll start with our first question. So since 2019, there have been 5 new treatments approved for members of the neuromuscular community. And this year alone, in 2020, Evrysdi was approved as a treatment for spinal muscular atrophy, also known as SMA, and Viltepso was approved as a treatment for Duchenne muscular, also known as DMD. So let's start with Evrysdi, which became the 3rd treatment approved for SMA. Dr. Byrne, can you tell us a little bit more about this drug and what does it do exactly?
Yeah, Sharon. Evrysdi or risdiplam is the first oral agent that promotes the production of more of the SMN protein, which is deficient in patients with all types, in fact, of SMA. And the studies so far indicate that this is very complementary to the other current strategies, may be used in those who are not eligible for the other strategies, and also adds to the benefit of enabling this oral medication to achieve a similar effect in increasing SMN protein to rescue the survival of motor neurons. So it's very exciting time to have this additional modality available for SMA patients.
Dr. McNally, do you think it's important to have different drugs that work in different ways available for this disease?
Yeah, having an oral agent that can actually promote the exon skipping to treat SMA is a really exciting option. Many patients are treated with gene therapy, but there are still a large number of patients who are receiving the infusions into their spine several times a year as a treatment with exon skipping. So having an oral agent provides another opportunity and a distinct way of taking that drug by mouth as opposed to having to get the injections. There's also some belief in the research community, at least, that there could be some overlap where you could actually get a benefit of having more than one type of treatment, and that's a really important area for research to look into at this point.
All right, so sort of additive effect could be a possibility.
Yep.
So, it's really gratifying to see that, I think, given that MDA's overall expenditure since our inception is about $48 million in funding for SMA research. So that's both understanding the basic pathology as well as some of the translational research that led to the drugs that are available now. So we really appreciate seeing that come to fruit. Just switching gears a little bit, so Viltepso, the second drug that was approved for neuromuscular disease in 2020, is a drug for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So Dr. McNally, can you tell us a little bit about Viltepso and what it does?
So this is an exon skipping drug for exon 53 for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We know we've had drugs that target exon 51, and now we have ones that target exon 53, which means it opens it up to more patients with different types of mutations to be treated with this. What's exciting is this is also a slightly different chemistry coming to the marketplace. As somebody who's watched exon skipping come up over all the years, from 20 years ago when we first heard it being reported at research meetings, and now actually seeing these as drugs treating our patients. We knew we had to go through a few different chemistries to get something that actually worked. And even though we have these drugs right now, we're already looking at what are the next better chemistries coming down the line. And when I say that, I mean slightly different modifications of the actual chemistry that makes up the compound so that it becomes safer, fewer side effects, and better tolerated, maybe even longer dosing so that you don't have to take it as often. All sorts of different things that we're looking at that will make these even better in the future.
Dr. Byrne, did you have any thoughts about the impact of having this drug approved?
Yeah, well, of course, it opens the door to other specific therapies that are based on a given genotype. So, and the advent of new availability of diagnostic testing, whole locus sequencing now readily available across all the patient communities. And we'll see this expand, even in the context of newborn screening now. The rapid ability to confirm the diagnosis and understand the long-term outcomes or the prognosis with a given mutation type is being advanced in a variety of conditions. And now we'll see probably the advent of ability to look at other parts of the human genome that affect the disease phenotype. And this is an area Dr. McNally really spent a lot of time helping the scientific community to understand the importance of. And now I think we'll take advantage of the data collection in the MOVER database to look at those features of individual patients and how some may have a better course of illness than others using this technology. So it's not only the therapeutics, but even the diagnostic side is really an opportunity for learning.
Yeah, and for those of you out there, MOVER is MDA's patient registry and database, where we collect data across 7 different neuromuscular diseases and help use that to promote better research and clinical outcomes. So if you're interested in learning more about exon skipping and sort of the history of this approach and how it evolved, there's a blog that we posted recently where we interviewed Dr. Steve Wilton, who was really the pioneer of this technology, as much as 20 years ago, as Beth mentioned. So you can find that. I think the link is shared in the comment section of this Facebook Live program. So you can find it there. And over the 221 million that we've invested in Duchenne research, again, it's really nice to see that coming together. And one quick bonus question, as in SMA, do you think there's a possibility, and this is for either one of you, that the exon skipping drugs could have some potential to be combined with other types of therapies for an additive benefit, perhaps in the future?
I think that's one of the questions the research community wants to look at very carefully right now. It is possible. Theoretically, it's definitely possible, but it has to be tested to actually see whether adding things together gets you more SMN and therefore more benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add to that, aside from the direct scientific question about the combined effects, I think the MDA has the opportunity to have a big role in advocacy on behalf of patients, particularly with payers, because this really the practical issue here is whether there will be support for prior authorization of both therapies given the high cost of them, and whether we can help the insurance payers understand the direct benefit of having combination therapy.
Yeah, and our advocacy team is working on that now. So we have a series of payer panels planned for next year where we're really going to try and dive in and work on this issue specifically. So besides these new treatments that were approved, what other advancements have occurred in neuromuscular research that maybe you personally have noticed and found interesting this year? So I'll maybe start with Dr. Byrne.
Well, my research area for the longest time has been in the area of gene therapy, so I'm very excited to see some of these studies now, particularly in the Duchenne community, and certainly the approval of Zolgensma has been an important catalyst for all of the neuromuscular diseases and the field in general. We are learning a lot from the commercial use, which makes it more readily available outside of of clinical research. So, and the ability to have sites where these therapies are administered, where we can monitor patients closely, is where we're leveraging some of the common knowledge across the MDA Care Center network. So in the gene therapy community, we're really just at the beginning of deploying these out into the patient community. There's a lot to learn also from these young patients, as well as we move to older patient populations where they might have unique risk characteristics that need to be managed. So maybe Beth can comment on that, in particular in adult patients.
Yeah, I was just going to talk a little bit about it's obviously been a challenging year for everyone. And one of the key things we do as researchers is we get together and we talk about scientific advances in meetings. And we haven't had as much opportunity to do that this year because of the pandemic. But that said, we've made a bunch of virtual meetings work, including MDA has been supportive of a lot of virtual meetings. And we have been able to exchange a lot of scientific content. It's very important for us to do that type of exchange because it helps us get knowledge of what's happening even sooner and then use that in our own research. A couple things and highlights that I saw published this year that I thought were particularly exciting is there was a publication in PLOS Medicine talking about the efficacy and safety of vamorolone, which is a novel steroid that we hope will be useful in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I'm an adult cardiologist, so I see patients who've been on prednisone or deflazacort for 15 and 20 years, and so I see firsthand the side effects of having to be on those steroids for such a long period of time. And so I'm really excited that there may be some other opportunities on the horizon that hopefully will be safer and have fewer side effects. As Dr. Byrne just mentioned, we saw a publication on microdystrophin as a gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and that's certainly an extremely exciting area that we're all eagerly awaiting to see the next steps there. I was also attracted to a couple of interesting publications where we learned things from individual patients that teach us about diseases. There was a report on a new gene involved in FSHD. Many of you know facioscapular humeral dystrophy is a really challenging disorder to understand. It's very complicated at a molecular level. Genetically, we know what it links to, these Z4 repeats. But what they found was mutations in this new gene actually elicits the same effect, which is it opens up those D4, Z4 repeats and it increases DUX4 expression. So it's a completely different mechanism, but yet points to a really key regulatory point in the pathway, and you can learn that from even single patients. And then I saw a really interesting paper published in EMBO Molecular Medicine this year, looking at naturally occurring exon skipping that reframes dystrophin and a pathway that regulates that splicing. And again, that's learned from a single patient. And sometimes you can take those things from single patients and say, wait, there's a mechanism, there's a way we can go after that and think about turning that into a therapy. So lots of exciting things still happening. I look forward to when we can get together and talk about them in person.
That's fantastic. So we know that COVID-19 has caused adjustments to clinical trials. This year has been unprecedented, really. Are there other impacts on research of neuromuscular disease that you could talk about, maybe starting with Dr. McNally?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact to us, and I'm sure Dr. Byrne feels the same way, has been that we, in the clinical care centers, we rapidly pivoted to doing telehealth and video visits with our patients. And we think that's going to be a real lasting change for the neuromuscular community. We have long in the neuromuscular community wanted to have this capability of telehealth and video visits for a couple of different reasons. One, it is challenging for patients with limited mobility to get in and get seen. We envision a future where we would do some in-person visits, but intersperse those with video visits. And to me, it's been really great. Like, even though I lose that in-person contact with my patients, I can see what they're doing, what their home environment is. And I've gained a lot more from just learning about that as well and how I can help people better. And so that's been good. But the video visits also translate over to what we're thinking about in the clinical trial world. We have learned to actually try to get at endpoints and how people are functioning in clinical trials by examining them in their home. And sometimes that's using recorders to tell us about movement, or all sorts of different ways that we've figured out about assessing people people and how they're doing in their home environment or in their everyday life, as opposed to in the artificial environment when we take them into the healthcare center and we measure how far they can walk or how long it takes them to stand up. So I think we've learned a lot about this. I keep saying not everything bad has happened in pandemic. We've actually gotten a little bit of good out of this, and hopefully we can take the best parts of that and carry that forward when pandemic ends, which can't be soon enough.
Dr. Byrne?
Yeah, I completely agree. We have to enhance our availability to families across the care network, across the country. That is happening through televisits that, luckily the technology was there to be implemented, and some small changes in the regulatory environment allowed us to expand this capability to make it viable for academic health centers and even all providers across the country. So that is the silver lining of all this. And then I think we will just continue that same theme over into the clinical trial world. I hope that we can do more remote assessments, as Beth mentioned, the ability to use sensors is advancing regularly. Some of these technologies are built in to the to smartphone technology, so we can collect more data in the real world setting, and that'll be important in earlier approval of some of those therapies.
Great. So we can't talk about the year in review of research without talking about COVID-19 vaccine. We know there are multiple vaccines actively being reviewed by the FDA. What are your thoughts on the vaccine for the neuromuscular community? Maybe starting with Dr. Byrne?
Well, as the fact that most of the care centers are in academic health centers gives us a unique infrastructure and ability to help manage the distribution of at least these LNP vaccines, the lipid nanoparticles that require cold storage. We have access across both research pharmacies and within research labs, a way to store these materials so that they can be distributed quickly to the neuromuscular patient population. Certainly our older patients and those with cardiorespiratory problems are at great risk, and hopefully will be some of the earliest prioritized to receive the vaccines when they are made available after the healthcare worker community. Just to amplify one last part about that is that we also want to emphasize to patients and their families what's involved in getting 2 doses of the vaccine, how to mitigate some of the side effects that are seen, which are, even though there's some reluctance to participate and receive vaccines for a variety of conditions, we know this one's particularly important, that is broadly accepted, and there are some minor side effects that occur that should be anticipated, and so if we explain it well to patients, I hope that there's a broad participation, because that's what's going to be needed for everyone to be safe in the long run.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that by saying, so right now we're looking at 3 different vaccines, 2 of which are as what Dr. Byrne referred to as lipid nanoparticles or RNA vaccines. This is the first we're really seeing of vaccines that are RNA vaccines. And we don't fully have all the data about how safe it's going to be for everybody. We're seeing it rolled out. Will have been tested in 100 to 200,000 patients at the time that we see approval. And the first line we expect will be healthcare workers, and then probably it will be people who are over 65 or in long-term nursing facilities for sure, because we know those are the people at greatest risk. And then following that, it will be for people under 65, but with specific conditions like heart disease and lung disease, which we know can affect our adult neuromuscular patients. In terms of children, that's not considered a first line right now, because most children seem to only get this very mildly or not at all. Very, very few children with really serious complications. And when it rolls out to children, it will probably be more like teenagers as opposed to very young children, but that remains to be seen. it's really important to hear what we just heard, which is there probably is some mild side effect with getting these RNA viruses. We expect that. Some people think that's actually the sign that it's working, but we should not let that deter people from getting the second dose. The second dose is critical to make this work. And so while you might feel a little achy or even a little low-grade fever for a couple of days, that's a sign it's working. So.
Yeah, good words of wisdom there. So this is something that we're very concerned about at MDA. We know that people with neuromuscular diseases, for various reasons that we've just heard, can be in the high risk groups. So in October, MDA filed comments with the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, arguing that people with neuromuscular disease should be included in the phase 1 of the allocation of the upcoming vaccine. We'll continue reaching out to state and local jurisdictions to advise them about the inclusion of individuals with neuromuscular disease in the vaccine distribution. And we will certainly continue to update the community, so you will have, as this evolves, this plan to distribute the vaccine evolves, that you'll have all the latest information about that.
I just wanted to throw in one last thing. The other key part about these vaccines is it's going to take a while for all of this to work. So while we're all hearing a lot of excitement about vaccines having about 90% efficacy, the other thing that has 90% efficacy is this: wear a mask. Don't forget that.
Very good public service announcement. Thanks for that. So it would be remiss on Giving Tuesday not to mention that it is, of course, Giving Tuesday. And as you both know, MDA is the largest funder of neuromuscular disease research outside of the federal government. This isn't possible without the generous support of the community and donations to fund the work that we do. So perhaps in honor of Giving Tuesday, can you tell us a little bit about why it's important for people to support nonprofits like MDA? Dr. Byrne?
Well, it has been a challenging year for every philanthropic organization because a lot of the activities require that in-person contact that hasn't been possible. But it's even more important given the need for supporting the economy and other aspects of the scientific community, that effort that's gone into the vaccine generation, that there are going to be gaps in the discovery research that helps us advance treatments for neuromuscular disease. And it's really only through the specific donations to the MDA that can continue to happen. So we really appreciate and encourage people's participation in Giving Tuesday. And this the great advances of where we are now, this situation we have will get better from a pandemic standpoint, and then we need to get back to prioritizing advancing the care of every patient with a neuromuscular disease.
So I just want to, I want to echo that a little bit because, especially for MDA, yes, this has been hard for a lot of foundations, but think about what our normal MDA activities look like. They're filled with boot and galas and walks and all sorts of things that we just can't do right now. So the pandemic has had a very significant impact on MDA and its ability to raise funds. So we're really counting on people to step up right now, and Giving Tuesday is a really terrific opportunity to do that. Why do it now? Because it's never been a more exciting time. Muscle diseases are genetic diseases, and we're in an era right now where we have tools to fix genetic diseases. And it's so amazing to see drugs coming into the marketplace and knowing that we know the defects that we have to fix, and we now have the ability to do that. So it's a really good time to give. We're seeing the early fruits of all that giving over all the years, and we see so many more possibilities on the horizon.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. So to close the conversation today, we'd like to hear your thoughts about what's on the horizon for neuromuscular research in 2021 and beyond. What are you excited about for the future? Again, start with Dr. Byrne.
Well, this is an opportunity to continue to improve our early detection of neuromuscular diseases with newborn screening. We're advancing those programs certainly for a number of conditions, and SMA being one of the most important, where that early intervention will make a huge difference. We're seeing advances in diagnostics and understanding what other influences the rest of the genome has on the disease phenotype. And then we're seeing great therapeutic options using this transformative approach of genetic medicine. And that will not only apply to recessive diseases. I'm particularly excited about seeing how this technology can be deployed using both CRISPR and other means of silencing dominant mutations. And so that's what I think 2021 has to bring.
Great. Dr. McNally?
Well, first, let's hope 2021 brings the end of COVID-19. That would be fantastic. We'll all settle for that. But I think on the neuromuscular front, we have a lot of excitement. We know the trials are ongoing with microdystrophins in a couple different formats, so we expect more data from those, and that's something to keep an eye on in 2021. Hopefully, we'll hear some additional information again about better, safer steroids that have fewer side effects. I think that will be really exciting. And, there is much more going on than that. Again, we know a lot of the genetic problems right now, and now we have the ability to correct those things with gene editing as well as gene therapies. So it's going to be a very exciting 2021. And I think everyone agrees it has to be better than 2020, right?
It has to be. If it don't, jinx it. And I would say for MDA, I think one of the things that, I think is exciting about the future too, is taking some of these things that we've learned in SMA and Duchenne that have had these great advances in therapy and applying them to some of the even more rare disorders in MDA's program. So it would be great to see those move along as well. And I think we're going to see that in the next couple of years, and it's going to be a focus for MDA. So I want to thank you all for attending today's Facebook Live event. If you were unable to join the full conversation, the recording will be posted for playback on Facebook, as well as at mda.org/COVID-19. So I'd again like to thank Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma America, Sanofi Genzyme, and Genentech for their support of the Facebook Live program. So Dr. Byrne and Dr. McNally, thank you for joining us today and in sharing all of this great information.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, and thanks, MDA, for hosting this. I hope everybody's healthy and well, and that we see even better things happening next year.
Great. So stay up to date with future Facebook Live events by liking MDA's Facebook page. MDA looks forward to continuing these important conversations with you. Thank you for joining us. Please remember on this Giving Tuesday, the work we do depends on all of us as MDA looks to fund our mission of finding cures and treatments for neuromuscular disease. I wish you all well and a happy and safe holiday season.